Hey everyone, and welcome to week 10 of our Bible study. And so, week 10 is going to be the rest of Numbers all the way to into Deuteronomy. And now, Deuteronomy is pretty cool. I like Deuteronomy. I mean, I like the entire Old Testament because it talks about Jesus, but Numbers, some people don't like.
It points to Jesus.
It all points to Jesus in different ways. So, some of it's prophecy, some of it's foreshadowing, some of it's typology. And if you don't know what foreshadowing, typology, and prophecy are, prophecy would be like it's just talking directly about Jesus. Maybe it could be vague. Prophecy sometimes vague, some a little vague or symbolic. But like in Micah, I believe it's Micah. In Micah, where it says, your future king is coming from Bethlehem, or the Messiah will come from Bethlehem. And so, in the New Testament, it says that Herod's scholars knew about this prophecy. That would be a prophecy. Typology is kind of like type is something that looks like something, but then something comes along later and does it even better. Like it's David as the king and a priest and a prophet, but then Jesus comes along and is even better. He's the fulfillment of that. And then foreshadowing is something that points forward to something later on, where the sacrificial system is foreshadowing the need for Jesus, because these things don't atone for their sins fully. They have to be done every single time. So that's the differences of those. And that's why I really love going through the Old Testament. So if you've ever wondered, why do we even read the Old Testament anymore? Well, one, it's God's word. And two, it all points to Jesus. All right. So, Mom, what questions you got?
We're on week 10.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting out on day 1. Just go over it, and I will tell you if I have any questions.
I mean,
I think Numbers 29 through 32, I wrote that it's basically the dangers of disobedience.
mm-hmm.
Oh, and I also wrote down that Deuteronomy equals second law. Not sure what that means.
Yes. So,
because he broke the first ones? Like,
it could be that. It could also just mean the second book of the law or the second giving of the law. Because remember, Moses went up on the mountain 2 times, 40 times. For 40 days. And so, yes, Deuteronomy is basically like the rest of the law.
Yeah.
Or some of the first time, and then it fills it out. And a lot of these laws are like case laws. And if you don't know what a case law is a law you would get as a principle, not one that is meant to cover all of the stuff you should do, but it gives you examples of things you should do, and then you build from those examples. So let's say there's a law about making guardrails on top of your roof so that way your neighbor doesn't fall off and die. Well, that's a case law example for the Israelites to see that God cares about the safety of people, and you should too. And so, and that you are guilty if you don't take proper precautions for the things you own to keep them safe when others come around them.
Like in modern day, you have to have a fence around a pool.
Mm-hmm. OSHA, Occupational Safety Hazard Association, is basically taking that and just filling out the rest of it. So, and case law is meant to be built off of. So let's say you dug a pit and you didn't properly put up a sign in Israel or some way that people could see the pit or prevent people from falling in it. Well, they didn't have a specific law about that, but case law, they should look at the other law about the railings on the roof, they'd be like, okay, so you didn't dig this pit. It doesn't match the spirit of the law over here, this case law that we have from God. So you deserve a fine for whatever your pit did to that person. Could be even more severe if that person dies. You would be guilty of manslaughter. And if you're guilty of manslaughter, you're going to have to run to one of those cities that God provides.
Sanctuary cities.
Mm-hmm.
There's 3 of them.
Or pay, if it's manslaughter and they're willing to go with a fine, you can pay a significant fine. But that just all depends on whether the avenger of blood doesn't come and chase you down. But yes, so you're going to see in Numbers 28 through 32, or 29 through 32, there's a bunch of different sacrificial systems they're going to go through. There's rules on vows.
Yeah, in 30, I said, always do what you promise to do. So there's a lot on when you make a vow, you have to keep it.
Yes.
If you don't think you can keep it, just don't make that vow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the way with our marriage vows is you don't think you could keep that, don't get married.
Mm-hmm. So the Bible is very strong in Ecclesiastes and Proverbs and throughout the Old Testament completely that you need to watch what you say, because when you say things, God will hold you to them.
Wow.
So if you tell someone, it doesn't even have to be, I vow this. It could just be, I'm going to bring you some bread tomorrow. You've told a person you're going to do something.
And that's your word.
That's your word. If you don't do it, God holds you to that. If you didn't have to bring them bread if you didn't tell them.
If you're his children, he holds you to it, right?
Well, he's going to hold you accountable immediately if you're his child. If you aren't his child, on Judgment Day, it'll all be there in the book of judgment for you.
Right.
Maybe not. So we're going to get to...
It says keep your obligations and commitments.
Mm-hmm. And if you're under the authority of someone else, that person who has authority over you has the capability to cancel your vow. So here it shows the husband canceling the vow for the wife or the dad canceling the vow for his daughter. But it would presumably also be for any dependents that you have. It seems like a father could cancel it for a son that's still under his care. And likewise, it would usually be the head of the house that's able to cancel those vows once they become aware of them. They don't do it when they become aware of them, and the vow stands. So there are ways to have them canceled by other people who have authority over you. Now, it gets back to wiping out all the people when they're at war with specifically the people who are in the promised land. So God wants the people in the promised land out. They aren't allowed to be there anymore. He said the lamb's going to vomit them out. And if you read in other passages, it says God's already sent stuff ahead of the Israelites to prepare the people there, to make them afraid of the Israelites, to reduce their power. He says he's fighting for them so that way they will win when they go up against them. So it means, and when they get to Jericho, you can see this with Rahab, who everybody already heard about what your God did in Egypt. Because remember, it's been 40 years since they've been wandering around. So words travel around. And so you're going to see this later, but God's already got things set in place, and these people already know that they're coming this way, pretty much, like what, or at least about what God is doing. So they have a chance to run. If they run and leave the promised land right now, they don't have to die. Now, that's not said in the scripture, but That's why they're there. They're there to take the promised land. If the people in the promised land left the promised land, none of them would have to die. But if they make war against Israel, if they stay there, Israel will make war against them and has to completely destroy them. But if they make war against people that aren't in the promised land, they can offer peace, they can do other things. It's not complete destruction. Why? It seems like the promised land is special. God has promised it, set it apart as holy. This is special land, and the Canaanites and other groups that are living in this land have done some really horrible things, such that God is going to destroy them if they do not leave. Everyone has to die. You can't leave anyone alive, anything alive, except what God lets you. So everything is devoted to God. That's what that word is, devoted to God. You will devote them to God. So it means devotion for complete destruction in this case. So if you stay in God's holy land and you're not God's holy people and you continue to sin against him, you are devoted to destruction. Now, a lot of people will say, well, that doesn't seem fair, that everyone has to die. And so I would just say God's given them a long time. He's given them hundreds of years to repent and turn to him. And we see even when they go into the promised land, if they repent and turn to God, they would be spared, because we have Rahab who does. And she gets to live with Israel. And like you said, gets to become part of the line of Jesus. But you have to abandon all of your foreign gods and wicked practices if you're going to do that. Otherwise, you're destroyed. So I don't think it's unfair for the adults at all to be killed off by the Israelites or by God as an act of judgment. But then people will say, and then this is a harder one, but what about their kids? That's a bigger question that I don't have time to answer everything. I will make a few points before I continue on in day 2, because they're going to go out he's giving Moses and Joshua sort of military commands about what they're supposed to do when they go into the land. And the concern is, they've sinned so much in this land, their entire people group has to be wiped out if they stay. And I say if they stay, while that's not explicitly said in the text, the idea is they got to get out of the land. If they leave the land, it's not like God's going to tell them, go chase them down hundreds of miles away. No, they've left the land. That means they've been vomited out of the land like God said. But these people don't really leave. Not many of them leave the land. So what are they supposed to do? Well, they've got to kill all of them. And one of the reasons God gives is so that way you will not prostitute yourselves with their gods, and they will not become stumbling blocks. And then the other reason you see when he talks to Abraham is their sin wasn't full enough yet, but now their sin is full. So you get this entire picture there. Now, the kids of them are living amongst them. And remember that during this time period, there is a community of people. It's very community minded, and God is very community minded. It doesn't mean the kids sinned like their parents, but it does mean that there could have been things we just don't understand about community sin, such that the kids died with the parents, even though they're not unsaved like the parents. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So not many people in the conversation will say, oh, well, then the kids were all unsaved and God just killed them all and they were all wicked kids. Surely there probably were some kids who were really wicked and were accountable. And God knows whenever someone's mature enough to be held accountable for all their sins. But surely there were kids that weren't accountable. Well, even if I don't know exactly why God did what he did or commanded what he did, I do know that God is fair, just, and loving. So if kids did die that weren't supposed to be held accountable, they're with the Lord. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I know that God is good, and he showed himself to be good and loving and just and holy. So I know that whatever reasons he had behind that were good. And now I'm going to continue on, because then we got, after some of these commands on what they're supposed to do, they separate out into military divisions on day 2, and they start traveling around. And God has them wandering around for a long time. We're in chapter 34 now.
You didn't even go over any of the stuff.
I did. I said that they were getting sorted out into. I already talked about the sacrificial system.
Okay, so he sends 1,000 men to war against Midian, right?
Mm-hmm.
12,000 men are equipped for the war. Phineas is the leader that leads them in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
They took women and children captive and burned all the cities.
Correct.
And Moses is furious, because why?
Because they let the women live.
And God had said, kill them all.
Yes. Well, specifically for the Midianites, the women were the ones who led them astray to follow
So
Baal.
God had said to keep alive only the virgins and the little girls, to kill the women and boys.
All the young females who have not gone to bed with a man.
Keep alive the virgins and girls. And kill the women and boys.
The women who were virgins could live, because if they were virgins, then they obviously didn't seduce the people to do that, as well as the youths that were men would have been capable of fighting as well. And yeah. So.
And then it says that they kept 32,000 virgins.
Correct. So
they brought them in with them to Israel.
The Midianites were not specifically the people they were fighting in the Promised Land. The reason why I gave some of that background is because later we are going to see some of the rules of war come into place, and we see here some of the rules of the war coming into place about how God treats certain people groups based off of how they treat Israel and treat him. Because these women seduced the Israelites to follow the Baal of Peor, they weren't supposed to let any of the non-combatant women live unless they fit that qualification. And these people weren't even in the Promised Land. They weren't in the Promised Land area yet. So you are going to see different commands from God about war. But if you notice, most of the commands from God are not about war. They're about how to live. But when we do get to those commands, I just wanted to give some background on that.
So every man was killed, and they killed the 5 kings of Midian, which were, Evie, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba.
Mm-hmm.
And they killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with the sword.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Balaam was the oracle.
Yes, ma'am.
Why is he killed?
Because he's evil.
But why is he fighting with the Midian?
He lives in that land. He's Midian? One of them. Yes, ma'am.
So they let their oracle fight in the army?
No, everyone had to be killed, even if you weren't fighting in the army, except those who were young women and dependents that were not like male. So Balaam fit that qualification. He was a man, and he definitely wasn't innocent. So he had to die, even if he didn't go to war specifically. All right, so we also see that you have to give stuff to the Lord from the war, if you're even allowed to take anything at all. We'll see later that you're not supposed to take stuff from the cities of Canaan and keep it unless the Lord gives you permission, because you're supposed to devote it to the Lord. Everything is devoted to the Lord, even the people. So
the men took a census, and not one of them had died. Not one of the officers or commanders had died in that war.
Mm-hmm.
God had protected them immensely. And completely protected them actually. So the men wore jewelry during that time. If y'all can picture like Egyptian looking people, that they wore earrings and arm bracelets and rings and necklaces. So they took all of that, didn't they? And they gave it to God, and they ended up contributing 420 pounds of gold
Yeah,
as their
they think
offering to thank God for saving their lives.
It is a Thanksgiving offering, but also they say to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord. I don't fully understand why they think giving gold to God is going to make atonement for themselves, but the Bible doesn't necessarily agree that that's what happens when you give God gold. The stuff that actually they give, Eliezer doesn't use it as a sacrifice. He uses it as a memorial. He puts it into the tent of meeting, and they don't spend it on anything. They put it in the tent of meeting as a memorial for the Israelites before the Lord. So it's a reminder, basically, that the Israelites did give God what or as a Thanksgiving offering, these things. And so you'll see these things as reminders before the Lord, not because the Lord forgets, but because when the Lord looks at his people and they're sinning against him, he also sees the things that they've done for them, or that he's done for them, or that they've given to him, not because he needs it, but out of love or thanks. And it seems like that helps him, or it doesn't help him. You know what I'm saying? It's a memorial to show, like, don't just kill us all, God, when we sin. Please spare us, things like that. Right. And then he reiterates how he promised that only Caleb and Joshua would get to go there. And then we get some of the people want to stay on the other side of the Jordan and not go into the promised land. Mm-hmm. But they'll go inside and help them with the battle.
Gadites and Reubenites asked for the land of Gilead as a possession instead of living in Canaan.
Mm-hmm. And so they ask, and Moses says, as long as you go and help us fight for the promised land, sure. Right. And then we get to the next chapter. And it's the many different wanderings that God has them moving around. And God warns them and says, look, you got to get rid of all of the people, and you got to destroy all of their high places. You got to get rid of every single thing that leads them to idolatry. And I will give you this land, and I'll give you the things in the land, and everything will go well for you. But if you don't, they're going to become snares for you. They're going to become barbs in your eyes, thorns for your sides. They will harass you in the land where you live. And what I had planned to do to them, remember, to vomit them from the land, to kick them out with force, I will do to you instead. He says that right there.
Yeah. What I had planned to do to them, I will do to you. Ooh, that's scary.
So God planned to kick them out of the land with violent force, and if they stayed, they would die. Well, he does the same with Israel later, we'll see. When they continue to disobey the Lord, he exiles them. And the only ones that are left in the land are the ones that are under, basically, rule from the foreign powers that are already over their control. That's way later when we get to the exile. All right. He sets out their borders.
Well, Aaron, they retell the story about Aaron climbing Mount Hor, and he dies on the first day of the 5th month in the 40th year after the Israelites left Egypt. He was 123 years old. Mm-hmm. And this is in the wilderness of Zin. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
So he is buried with Miriam. She was buried in the wilderness of Zin. Is that right?
I don't know. All right. He died on Mount Hor. Mm-hmm.
Was that in the wilderness then?
If it is, then it's a different area because he dies there and is presumably buried there too. It doesn't say he was buried there, but unlike Moses, who later we'll see.
So they traveled from Kadesh, which is the wilderness of Zin, and camped at Mount Hor on the edge of the land of Edom. So I guess it was near there. Mount Hor must have been near Kadesh. But anyway, moving on.
All right. And then we get.
So Moses lived to what, 120? And Aaron lived to 123.
And Moses himself wrote a psalm that acknowledged that the normal lifespan of the time was 70 or 80 years old. So he knows he lived longer. And he didn't have many of the things that ail old people. Now, he sets apart land. He's telling them what land they're going to be set apart for and the tribes, and he's dividing it, or he's telling them what's going to happen when they go in. And then he says, look, we're going to give you cities of refuge. So if people kill someone accidentally, so aka manslaughter, then they can run there and the Avenger of Blood won't be able to get them. Now, the Avenger of Blood is a family member of the person who gets killed by a murderer who needs to go kill the person who murdered their family member. And it's an act of justice, but it's also an act of compassion from God towards that person, because if you get to kill the person that killed your family member, A, they die for their sin, which satisfies justice. And B, the person who kills them gets, peace about the situation because they got to be involved with the justice that is dealt towards that person. All right, and so people who run to these cities the Avenger is not allowed to kill them there. And they're tried, if it's found to be manslaughter, they can stay there.
Right.
And until the priest dies, and then they can go back home.
Which is going to be a long time. They might as well get ready to live in that city. They just moved. They're there for good.
Yeah, and then they give case laws for how to deal with people killing people. And it's like, if anyone strikes a person with an object and death results, he's a murderer, put him to death. So basically the idea there is, if you are attacking someone with something and you not necessarily are intending to kill them, but you are intending to hurt them and they die as a result, you're a murderer. You are to be put to death. So that's what would be called second-degree murder today. Mm-hmm. You're still a murderer. You're put to death.
You get to go to the refuge city if you have an unintentional killing,
which would be manslaughter.
Right. But
first and second degree murder,
if you were fighting because you're angry, you're going to be put to death.
Mm-hmm. So, because murder is murder, and murder in the Bible, and I think today, if you read from the time of Noah, when God gives them that command, anyone who sheds blood, the blood of man, well, by men, his blood will be shed. And it's basically saying anyone who murders someone has to be put to death by people. But then it says if anyone suddenly pushes a person or does something without any intent of maliciousness, so malicious intent would be just trying to hurt them. They weren't trying to hurt them. If you weren't trying to hurt a person and you accidentally kill them, then you can run to these cities, and God has a place for you to be protected until the high priest dies.
It was 6 cities of refuge, 42 other cities for the Levites, right? So there was 48 cities total. Something that I did love was that they mentioned several times through the scriptures that we've been reading the last few weeks, is that every time was like cross the Jordan. So they must have stayed on the other side of the river from Canaan pretty much the whole time. Like they crossed the Jordan to go into the promised land. So I don't know. It was just sweet, like crossing the Jordan. There's actually an old TV show that I called Crossing Jordan. Her name was Jordan. Lawyer or something. I thought that was so cool, like crossing Jordan. But I wonder if there's a song called that, crossing the Jordan or crossing Jordan. But it's just in there. It's said in there so many times, like cross the Jordan, cross the Jordan. And also, it's right here where it says the Lord spoke to Moses in the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. So Jericho is basically in Canaan, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's the first city they take.
Mm-hmm. So it's like a fortified. It's a fort city that sits on the river and protects the entry into the area.
Well, like there's a lot more land and stuff in Canaan.
Oh, of course.
Jericho is just the first fortified city they took, right? And then one other thing that they said throughout the scriptures that I read was they always taught how you can't condemn a man by one witness. There has to be two or more. And I love that God did that. He's like, you're not going to come up and say this. Like, well, actually, he took care of it a lot because first he said, don't bear false witness to your neighbor. And then there has to be two of you or more.
And also, if you lie and try to get your neighbor in trouble, whatever you were trying to get done to them has to be done to you once they figure it out that you were lying.
Yeah. So he does
If
cover
that
that like three
happened
different
today,
times.
where if you accuse someone of something and you're lying about them in court, if that happened today where you would get the punishment that they would get if they had been accused correctly, there'd be a lot less false accusations.
Well, I would hope Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds went to jail. I really would. That's what I'm following.
What did they accuse?
I'm following right now on YouTube. She accused Justin Baldoni basically of sexual harassment and just made him out to be a complete pervert and all kinds of stuff. And there is absolutely no evidence to show that. And actually, all the evidence I've seen makes you believe that he is just an amazing, sweet guy.
So,
like almost so sweet that they know that they could take advantage of him, and they did horrible things to him.
If we were doing the Israelite laws today, that kind of slander and false accusation, they would determine what would have happened to him if it was true.
He would have went to prison.
And then they would have did it to her instead.
She and Ryan Reynolds would go to prison. That would be awesome. Because they have ruined that poor man's life. His wife, and I don't know if he has one child or more children, but whatever offspring he has, they're suffering through this.
And then there is no sacrifice for murder. If you murder someone, the only way to atone for that is if the person that murdered the other people dies. The only way is justice. There is no suitable substitute for your life if you are a murderer. Which means, at least provided by the law, as well as pretty much any sort of murder that's not accidental.
Thing was, what's that guy's name that leaves all his inheritance to his daughters because he doesn't have sons? Right here.
Yes.
Zelophehad. Right here.
Okay. Zelophehad. Zelophehad?
I don't know. But they instructed the daughters that they would have to marry inside the family so that his inheritance would stay in the family. So they married cousins on the father's side. So you could still marry your second cousin way back then and your first cousin, I guess.
You could marry your direct family.
Right. Now you can't marry your first cousin. You can marry your second cousin. Right?
I think so. And many of these reasons are typically that the gene pool, and obviously they didn't understand that at the time. The gene pool was getting worse and worse. But also some of these laws were just because you just don't do that. You don't marry your father's wife. You don't marry your stepmother. You don't go into your stepsister. You don't go into your basically there's a bunch of laws that God gives on that. All right. And so in Deuteronomy now.
So now it's gotten so God has made it to where if you marry someone close in your family, there'll be a lot of birth defects.
Not just that. obviously, I don't think it was right for people to marry, just in general, their stepmom or things like that, even before God gave those commands.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, as the years went on, God made it more to where there was consequences, more dire consequences.
For marrying, yes, ma'am. I just think that some of the marriages were always wrong and God just made it more explicit. And some of the marriages that they were doing became wrong because of how harmful it was becoming to them due to the DNA corruption. So Moses gets help at that time, or at least he's kind of recounting. We're in Deuteronomy 1.
On day 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you know how I talked about the 11-day journey? Here's another thing that talks about it. 11-day journey.
Yeah. So it's not very far, and they
so sad.
Had to stay there forever, basically. In about 40 years, now they can go in there. And so Moses is kind of just going over what's already happened. He's recounting their journey. And then for day 3, it's basically, day 3 is just all of Moses recounting what they've done and where they've come from. And ending with the commission of Joshua. Now in day 4, now he charges everyone of Israel to listen to the things.
On day 3, it's basically it's instructing you on how to be a fair judge. That's basically what that was. All right.
Well, I mean, he's recounting many of the points of the things that they went over already, of their journey. So now in day 4, we are getting to the command of Moses. It's just a recap.
They're talking about the Lord your God who goes before you will fight for you.
Oh, yes. It is amazing. And
another thing I figured out, Moab, that they talk about quite a lot, is Lot's land.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
It was the land where Lot lived, the Moabites.
Here's where they talk about those giants. Anakim.
Yes, ma'am. The Anakim. Rephaim. So.
And then here is where they're talking about the villages as far as Gaza. And right now, Gaza is in the news every day.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that where the Palestinians live right now?
Yes, ma'am. And the Muslim people, or the ethnicity of the Palestinians and the Muslim groups is typically understood by them to be from Ishmael. They understand themselves to be the descendants of Ishmael. Now, do I know whether they're descendants of Ishmael? No, but if they have these records and they understand themselves to be from Ishmael, I don't really have anything to say against them. Now, the issue is there's a lot of other things going on, but Ishmael is definitely not the people who God promised this land to. Promised it to Jacob's descendants, not Ishmael. And so, yeah, we've got this entire religious argument between them over who owns this land. And it's pretty clear that Israelites own the land, but...
So do you watch all of the stuff about Israel and Palestine that's going on right now?
I don't watch all of it. I just know enough.
So Candace Owens talks about it every day, and everybody calls her... what is it when...
Anti-Semitic?
Yeah, anti-Semitic. And I don't think she is. I really believe that she just hates that Palestinian kids have just been murdered, and a lot of horrific stuff has been going on, and she just is against that, no matter if it's Israel, Palestine, or whatever. What are your views on that, real quick?
I mean,
Do you think it's okay
we're a
for?
little off topic, but sure. I think during war, you should not intentionally target non-combatants unless you have an incredibly good reason. I don't even know what those reasons would be. There might be really good reasons for you to be able to intentionally target a non-combatant, but in general, you don't target non-combatants intentionally. That being said, you could target combatants intentionally and even know that it could hurt the non-combatants in the area, and that might be okay. Because let's say you're targeting supply lines and you're cutting off their supply lines for the military. Well, cutting off the supply lines, you also know will cut off supply lines for food to the civilians too. But you're not doing it to target civilians, you're doing it to target the military. You just know that there might be consequences for the non-combatants. I think that case is okay.
But that's
because you're not intentionally targeting non-combatants.
Israel is intentionally killing those children over in Palestine, and she's against that, and that makes everybody says that makes her wrong and against.
I just gave you what I said.
My point is how do you feel? Because a lot of people think because we're Christians we can't be like on the side of Palestine. We have to be on the side of Israel.
I'm not on the side of either. I'm on the side of God.
Yeah, but that's God's people.
But they're not on the side of God all the time.
I know. That's why I'm asking your opinion. In this situation, is it fair to be against Israel?
If they're intentionally targeting non-combatants, then I would be against Israel in that specific scenario. That does not mean I'm against Israel in the war. Right. It means I'm against...
Because we have Israel's flag up there. I'm just saying, I understand what Candace Owens is saying.
If they are not intending to target non-combatants, and they're intentionally targeting combatants, and non-combatants are just getting some of the backlash from them targeting the combatants, then I'm okay with that. But I don't know enough about the situation, so that's why I gave you a general principle of how I understand these things. You just don't intentionally target non-combatants unless you have an incredibly good reason. And just because they're a part of the enemy nation and you don't like them or something like that is not a great reason.
So in day 3, they fight that battle and leave no survivors. And they say the Lord our God gave everything to us. Mm-hmm. In neither one of those cities was there any survivors. They killed both King Sihon and King Og, and they left no survivors.
Yep. And then...
What about this one? King Og was left of the remnant of the Rephaim, which were those giants. Said his bed was 13.5 feet long, 6 feet wide. A big man.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how much longer a bed is normally than you. I know it's a little bit longer. But that means this man was probably 10 feet tall.
Probably.
I didn't say that there couldn't be giants. I'm just saying I don't know how they serve. They should have all died in the flood.
They should have, but it's very obvious they did not. Because, David's fighting one not too long later.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, I don't know exactly the answer to all of that. The Bible is not completely clear on why there are giants again, especially since they would have all died in the flood. So I don't know. However, in Deuteronomy 4, we get Moses' commands to them, basically saying, look, you need to be on guard. You need to stay faithful to the Lord. You need to trust him. And you got to listen to him. And then he tells them, you got to also tell your children. You gotta reiterate these things. You gotta keep this in your mind. You gotta keep these statutes, so that way you and your children can live in the land. All right. So then Moses summons them together, and
Where are you at now?
Chapter 5 of Deuteronomy.
You mean day 5?
Chapter 5 of Deuteronomy. So that's right. Chapter 4.
Oh. Well, what about here?
I already went over that.
Yeah, but you didn't cover. The Lord was angry with Moses and basically said, do not ask again.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It's like this, he's God's child, which he is. And you know how we always say, don't ask me again.
Yeah, like, are we there yet question people get?
Or, are we there yet? Or don't ask me again. No, like when you're asking for something, your mom's already said no.
Mm-hmm.
Or your dad's already said no, and you ask again. I feel like God was like, I already told you the answer. Don't ask me again.
Yeah, so God is firm about not letting Moses into the promised land because of what he did. Leads me to believe it's not just because of a rock issue.
Yeah.
It's because of the foreshadowing he was going for, the dishonor that he had shown towards God in front of all of Israel. There's a bunch of things going
on. And then before we go to day 5 or Deuteronomy 5, once again, and it said this several times, and it reiterates it. And then I know it says it later on in the Bible too. Do not add or take away anything from what the Lord says.
Mm-hmm.
So
now he goes over the 10 Commandments. He goes over a bunch of different commandments, starting with the 10.
What about this one? He's talking about Moses, like basically, he says they heard, how to explain this, but talking about they heard God's voice but didn't see a form. So
there is no form. So it means that there's no physical body that you can place on an altar or make an idol out of and worship.
Yeah, but they're seeing God's shadow go by. Nobody else has done that. Probably only Adam and Eve and Moses.
Shadow? What do you mean?
It's his form. Earlier, it said that Moses saw God's form. He asked to see him, and God showed his form to him and let his form go past him. And it says here, diligently watch yourselves, because you did not see any form on the day the Lord spoke to you out of the fire at Horeb.
Mm-hmm. God, the form of God in both of these passages, I think, is two different things. Here, I think it means a physical form because they were tempted to make idols. There's no form on the Ark of the Covenant in between the cherubim, which is where you would normally put the picture of the image of your God. And God specifically left it empty, implying he has no physical form. He's a spirit. God's spiritual. There is no physical form to him. So
yes.
What?
But I would think that the form was like a shadow, like he got to see the shadow of God go by. Because that's what he's saying earlier, was when Moses kept saying, I want to see you.
I want to see your glory. And then God
shows him his form as he walks.
God covers him and lets him know who he is. That's his glory. That's his form there. It's not about a physical body. It's
I keep saying, I'm not saying body. I'm saying his form. Well, whether it be a shadow.
A shadow has to be cast by a physical body.
No, it doesn't. Not as God. It doesn't have to be anything. Go on. Just move on to the next thing then.
The idea that, and no, this is important. So God doesn't have a body. So whatever form he took in the garden to walk with the people was voluntarily taken on to relate to them. But the form, the glory that Moses asked to see or experience and that he gets exposed to is not God with a body per se. It's when he asks to see his glory, God tells him who he is. Yahweh, Yahweh, a God who is gracious, compassionate, and faithful, forgiving iniquity, but who will by no means clear the guilty. And that's what he gets when he asks for God's glory. He doesn't get a big, imposing bodily form. He gets who God is. the
That is not
form
what it
of
says
God.
earlier. Earlier, it says he saw the form of God go by.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
I don't know. I'm just telling you what it said in earlier passages when Moses asked to see the form of God and he got to see it. And then they say this again. God says this again, diligently watch yourselves because you did not see any form on the day the Lord spoke to you.
Mm-hmm.
But when Moses asked to see a form of God, he was able
asked to see God's glory. He didn't ask to see a form. He said, show me your glory.
I can't find this, but it was back here. You should have read it. So you can go back and find it.
All right.
But yeah, he's talking about getting to see the form of God. And then God is reiterating it right here. That they are not like Moses because Moses got to see the form of God. Not saying that he saw God because, I think he would have died if he actually saw him. But I think it might have been something like like the shadow or I don't know what I was asking you about, but you don't seem to have even read the thing.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I know what you're trying to imply.
I'm not implying. I'm saying it said it back there. All right, move on.
All right.
Do not also put, do not worship creation, worship the Creator. That's basically the other gist from there that God's saying. And then God is a consuming fire, a jealous God, and a compassionate God.
Correct.
That's what I got from there.
So he loves people. He's willing to go with his people. And he's willing to carry their sins. But if they do not give him their sins, they do not repent, he will destroy them for their sins. Because he's willing to, he's forgiving, he forgives iniquity, sins, transgressions, but who will by no means clear the guilty. So if he's not forgiving you, he's not going to clear you either. It's not like he's going to ignore your sin. If you're not giving him your sin and if he's not carrying it, he's not clearing you. You're going to be under his judgment. So that's why repentance, when they inevitably turn against him, is so important too. All right, so the Lord just goes over the things that he's going to do for them, and he reminds them.
Well, he once again, first he says you didn't see a form, so in other words, you're not as good as Moses. Then he goes and says it again. He's telling everybody, here's why you're not as good as Moses. You didn't get to see a form of me. You did. Has any other people heard God speaking from afar and lived?
You were two pages back. We were not on the same page. So
yeah, I'm still in 4. Has any other people heard God speaking from afar and lived?
right. So God doesn't have a physical form because he is specifically saying, watch yourselves. You didn't see a form on the day the Lord spoke to you. So don't act corruptly and make an idol for yourself in the shape of any figure, male, female, animals, fish, anything like that. And you can't worship the stars either. And then if you go and you research what the Ark of the Covenant is, there's 2 cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. And what would sit in between the spiritual figures or the spiritual beings is typically an idol or the image of your God. But God specifically said, do not put anything there. That's the mercy seat, and that's where I am going to be. So what's in the middle of the cherubim? Nothing physical. You can't have a single physical object there because God has no physical form. So that's all they're trying to reiterate here. They're trying to reiterate you can't make idols because God doesn't have physical body. They're not trying to focus on the fact that Moses got to see something that they didn't. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, I'm not saying that it was a physical form. I've said that 100 times.
Well, then, if you aren't trying to say that, then what are you trying to say?
I already said, I think it may have been a shadow. It may have been something. I'm not sure what it was, but
You think it was a vision of some sort?
maybe. But he saw something. And nobody else has ever done that. I suspect besides Adam and Eve. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. So, chapter 7.
Oh, wait. Where am I at?
I told you you're 2 pages behind. We're on 293, chapter 7.
Okay, I'm done with that. I don't think I have any more questions. Because this, I just made like the little... This is basically him going over the 10 Commandments with them.
I told you a lot of this is reiteration.
Right.
You'll notice that a lot of these are in quotes because Moses is just reiterating or quoting what he's already said.
And then God tells him, today I spoke with a person and he still lives.
Where? You need to like put lines that point.
Today we have seen that God speaks with a person, yet he still lives.
Correct. He spoke with the elders one time when they had a meal on the mountain, like partway up the mountain, and then he spoke with Moses most of the time. Mm-hmm. And he spoke to the people, but then they said, please do not let him keep speaking to us, or else we'll die. Yeah, right after that, they said, but now why should we die? This great fire will consume us if we keep hearing the voice of the Lord our God any longer. All right. And the Lord agrees. He says, if only they had a heart to fear me. But you stand here with me, and I will tell you every command. All right, so the Lord gets to go talk to them. Moses gets to go talk to the Lord, and then he's going to go over all the commands that he has for them. And he's going to reiterate, don't forget who God is. Don't forget the Lord. Don't forget to fear him. Don't follow other gods. Remember to remind everyone, in the future, your kids, what we're doing this for. Remind them of how God saved you. And when the Lord brings you into the land, you're supposed to defeat them. You must completely destroy them. You can show no mercy to them. You cannot intermarry with them, because they'll turn you away. And they'll turn you away to other gods, and then the Lord will be angry against you and destroy you. All right. What you're going to do is you're going to destroy them down. You're going to destroy the people. You're going to destroy all their altars. You're going to take possession of the land that I've given you. And then he reiterates, know the Lord your God is God. This is chapter 7. The faithful God who keeps his gracious covenant loyalty for 1,000 generations of those who love him and follow his commands. But he directly pays back and destroys those who hate him. He will not hesitate to pay back directly the one who hates him. So keep these commands that I'm giving you today. If you keep these commands, he will bless you. He will multiply you. He will do these things from you. He will protect you in this land.
You will prosper.
You will prosper in this land. And do not be afraid of the other nations. If you are afraid of the other nations, don't be terrified of them, because I will be going before you. I will destroy them. I will help you win this.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you're out of that, but in 6 it says, do not test the Lord. Mm-hmm. Who is this? M-A-S-S-A.
Massa is a place.
Oh, it is a place.
It's one. Is it one of the places where they ask for water? I think it's one of the places where they ask for water.
You're right. All right, and then he goes over prosperity and preservation.
All right, we're already on day 5. All right. So Moses then reiterates, you must be careful to follow these commands. You cannot fail to follow these commands. You're going into the land.
Oh, are you over here now?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm over here under the hornets. God will send hornets until all the survivors and those hiding from you perish.
Mm-hmm. So
that's pretty awesome. Like, God just doesn't play.
God is sending things ahead of them to prepare the land for them to just take it over. So if people try to run away and hide in the land, God will send things to go kill them.
Right. That's what I was talking. I was reading that and I was like, you just cannot get away from God.
You can't hide in God's land. I mean, you can't hide outside of God's land, but notice the idea is if they are hiding in the land, God will make sure they can't do that. Right. They need to leave or they die.
And then it says, God will help you destroy them little by little. He will throw them into a great confusion.
Mm-hmm. So God confuses them. God sends fear on them. That's why Rahab and the people know of the Israelites, because they're afraid of them after what they've heard God do to Egypt. He's sending animals ahead of them, like the hornets. Like, God ain't playing. All right, so.
And also, like, they were in the wilderness for 40 years. Well, I mean, they were not just necessarily in the wilderness. They did go through some cities and things, but they were not in the promised land for 40 years. So they didn't get to.
The wilderness is just the place of wandering where there's not a lot of resources for them.
Right.
Because of how big they are. And so the cities and the towns they went to are not significant in the sense of being able to support them. So they are still, the wilderness gets off the idea of inhospitable. It's inhospitable to this large group of people.
So it tells us that their clothes did not wear out and their feet did not swell for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand the feet swelling. I mean, I guess because they're walking most of the time. Mm-hmm. Like they're just walking around, but don't they like stop for weeks at a time?
Oh, well, but they also have like dirt and crap all over their feet since they wear sandals most of the time. It's amazing they didn't get infections and their feet swelling.
True. They didn't have a lot of, they didn't have sandals?
They had sandals.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
you're walking through the desert and the dirt, it's going to get into your feet if you're wearing sandals.
But their clothes did not wear out and their feet did not swell for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So cool. All right.
Now we're on this area. God's reminding them, look, when you get there and you get comfortable, don't think to yourself, oh, look at what we did to get this land. Don't start puffing yourself in pride because I gave you this land. You didn't get it out of your own power. So the Lord is going to cross in front of you. The Lord will give you this land, not because of your righteousness or integrity. The Lord is giving this land in order to fulfill the promise he gave to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and because these people are super wicked. So he says it in verse 5 and 6. You are not going to take possession of their land because of your righteousness or your integrity. Instead, the Lord your God will drive out these nations before you because of their wickedness. This is chapter 9 of Deuteronomy, verse 5 and 6. The Lord will drive out these nations before you because of their wickedness, in order to fulfill the promise he swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Understand that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness. You are a stiff-necked people. So he's basically saying, do not get comfortable in the land and then think, oh, we did this because we're so good. We got this.
He goes through and describes all the stuff that will be in the promised land, like streams, springs, deep water sources, wheat, barley, vines, figs, pomegranates, olive oil, honey, iron, and copper. Why is it called the land of milk and honey?
Because milk and honey represents prosperity. Always. Honey is sweet, and milk is also kind of sweet back then because they didn't pasteurize it. It was just raw milk.
But milk is pretty much life.
It gives you energy.
Babies had to have milk from some animal or human to survive.
But the idea is one of prosperity. A land of plenty is what it is. And they even bring back grapes that are huge compared to normal grapes. Like they knew it's a land of plenty. The idea is the land has abundance. It's got plenty of stuff that you're going to need for your people, and God will make sure it does as long as you listen to him.
Well, it's also talking about God is trying to he's giving them the encouraging speech here. Like, today you're going to cross the Jordan and you're going to go into Jericho and you're going to see, well, I think it's Jericho. You're going to see the sons of Anak. Anak? Is that how you say it? I never say it right. And you know these, you know that they're giants, you know that they're large people, but don't be afraid, I'm with you, and we will destroy them swiftly. And I love his encouraging speech, but yeah, he says that he will devastate and subdue them and destroy them swiftly. But he talks about the people are strong and tall. You know about them and you have heard it said about them. Who can stand up to the sons of Anak? And then it goes back to reiterate about when God helps Moses with the Ten Commandments. God actually inscribed the Ten Commandments on those stone tablets with his own finger.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool.
In chapter 10, God says, "Now, Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you except to fear him, walk in his ways, love him, worship him with all your heart and all your soul?" This is chapter 10, verse 12 of Deuteronomy. And then 13 says, "Keep the Lord's commands I am giving you today for your own good. The heavens, indeed the highest heavens, belong to the Lord your God, as does the earth and everything in it." So he's saying everything belongs to the Lord. However, or yet the Lord has chosen your ancestors and loved them. He chose their descendants after them, and he chose you out of all the peoples, as it is today. Therefore, circumcise your hearts. Do not be stiff-necked any longer. So the idea of circumcising your heart is so that way you will be internally like the way you are externally. They were circumcised to show they were God's people on the outside, but internally they did not care about God. They didn't have the mind or the heart for God. So he's saying basically, look, turn away from your sin. Stop being stubborn. Follow the Lord. And he's telling them because they have a choice in this matter. And he's going to present a choice to them at the end of Deuteronomy of life and death.
Well, up here, I always thought that Moses got so angry, he just like, when he saw it, he was so angry, he just dropped the Ten Commandments.
He slams them on purpose.
But it says that Moses threw the tablets. He threw himself. It's like me.
Well, it also symbolizes that they immediately just broke the things. They just broke the commands that God immediately had already told them.
Oh my gosh, I never realized that.
He throws them and breaks them because they've already broken them.
They already broke them. That is so cool. I never thought about it that way.
All right. And in verse 18 of chapter 10, it talks about how he loves everyone. He loves even the oppressed. And you are also to love the resident alien, because you were aliens in Egypt. And you're to fear the Lord your God and worship him. So you can't mistreat others who are living among you who aren't Israelites, because you were living among Egypt. So God has rules and laws for everyone. And all of this to say they are supposed to model who God is to the rest of the world. Remember, he said to Abraham, "I will bless you and you will be a blessing to the world. I will make you a blessing to the world." And these people were supposed to be that blessing to the world, and they just did not help the world see God.
I did not realize that Moses is the one that made the Ark of the Lord's Covenant that hold the Ten Commandments. Did you know that Moses is the one that made the Ark of the Lord's Covenant to house?
If I did, I forgot.
I think that's what it says. Moses made the Ark of acacia, what is it? Acacia wood to house the Ten Commandments. Ark of the Lord's Covenant. So cool. So Noah made a boat, and Moses made an ark. Wait, Moses made a boat. No, Moses made.
You said it first.
Noah made an ark, and Moses made an ark.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It is true. Different kinds of arks, but yes.
But that's what they call both of them arks.
So an ark would be a thing to store and stuff inside of.
Right.
So the ark that Noah went in was to store him and the rest of the animals. And the ark that Moses made was very small and was meant to store these items. All right, so the Lord reiterates, you must continue to remind yourself and your children all these things that I've told you. And the Lord, he says, look, I've set before you today a blessing and a curse. There's blessing if you obey the commands and listen to your God and follow him, and a curse if you don't obey your commands and turn aside from his path that I command you today by following other gods. And then we start day 6. You have any questions?
Let's see. Oh, I just wrote down like what all the area is that Canaan covered. And then I said, love God, walk in his ways, remain faithful to him. He repeats that over and over throughout all of the Israelites' time. Wait, obedience equals blessing and disobedience equals curse.
Correct. But the issue is...
The question I had here was, it says that you could go and eat a gazelle or a deer without having to do it with the priest, right?
Yeah, so there are specific things that you can do with certain animals.
I know it said over and over that if it was a gazelle or a deer, you could just eat it. But other things, you would have to take it to the priest before you could eat it.
Yes, ma'am.
That's weird.
So whenever you want, you may slaughter and eat meat with any of your city gates according to the blessing the Lord your God has given you. Those who are clean or unclean may eat it as they would a gazelle or deer, but you must not eat the blood. Pour it on the ground like water. So the idea here is if they do eat meat outside of showing it to the priest, they have to drain the blood that the priest would normally do.
Yeah, but the only times I talk about it is with gazelles or deer.
It says as they would a gazelle or deer.
Yeah, but it says it again later. So
it's like a metaphor or a symbolism. It's just a reference. Those who are clean or unclean may eat it as they would a gazelle or deer, but you must not eat the blood. It says whenever you want, you may eat meat. And they're just comparing gazelle or deer to the meat that they would normally eat in that area.
They're saying that with the gazelle and the deer, they don't ever have to bring it to a priest. Why just those two animals?
Because I noticed they're wild animals.
They say it in other places too.
Because they're wild animals, you'd go and hunt them. You wouldn't farm them. You would kill them there and start cooking the food. So he's just saying, look, you can do it. You can kill your own livestock like you would the animals you hunt, but you got to drain their blood.
I noticed several times reading through this, it always says, do what is right in the sight of the Lord. Do what is good and right in the sight of the Lord. He constantly has to tell the Israelites that. Do what is good and right in the sight of the Lord. Jeez, people.
All right. And then he gives rules on prophets. The way you know that a prophet is a prophet is because they come true. If a prophet says something and then it comes true and they say, let's follow other gods, you still kill them.
You still need to kill them.
Because they are urging rebellion against your God. So I think the idea there is, they got something right. But they still are not speaking from the real God because they're telling you to follow other gods too. You gotta kill them. And then anytime someone says or tries to tell you to commit idolatry, that person has to die. You are the sons of the Lord your God. Do not cut yourselves or make a bald spot on your head on behalf of the dead. And then he goes over the things you can't eat.
Is that like the tattoo thing?
It's connected into it. That's the same language that you see around that.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there's a lot of practices for the dead and maybe ritualistic practices that priests would do. All right.
So it's talking about the sacrificing their own children. Don't do that. That's a detestable act. Once again, he talks about do not add or take away from God's word. And they repeatedly throughout this tell them to purge the evil from the Israelites and to show no pity. Do not spare or shield them. Stone him to death. Any of these people who break God's commands.
Things that deserve the death penalty almost always admit of no other substitute for that person whatsoever. I say almost always because someone's going to bring like that one thing up where like they must be put to death, but if they agree, then you don't have to. They could pay this big fine instead or something like that. I don't know. But the idea there is there are some things that are just worthy that just, yeah, you die immediately. Even though all sin is worthy of death before God, in a community of humans living on earth, even before their own judicial system or the legal system, they have to put people to death for certain sins too.
Right.
Like, you just can't let them continue on in that because of how sinful or how bad it is.
I love how this God gives them these instructions. So 1, inquire, 2, investigate, and 3, interrogate.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good rules that our justice system these days stick by, I think. You inquire of whatever happened, the murder, the crime, or whatever. Then you investigate it. Then you interrogate the people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hold your court for the justice.
So, remember, this is case law. Basically, the idea is you have to have good evidence before you convict someone of a crime, especially a crime worthy of death. If someone murders someone and they're worthy of death, they need to be put to death because of that. You need to have good evidence before you put them to death. Does it mean that it has to always be 2 or 3 witnesses? Well, what's a witness? I think they understood witnesses to be people who witnessed, but also things that can witness, because they set up rocks as a witness before.
Really?
Well, they used the term witness for them. So when they crossed the Jordan, they set up 12 rocks, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And they say, this is a witness. So the idea is just something that counts as evidence. So you need to have 2 or 3 sources of evidence to convict someone of murder. That could be a literal eyewitness, or it could be something else. Like you have
evidence.
You have, let's say a man kills someone with his favorite knife, and everybody in the community knows it's this dude's knife. Well, that counts as evidence against that dude. You know what I'm saying?
Counts as a witness.
Counts as a witness against him. And then if you have another witness, say a person who saw him do it with the knife, then with the other person's blood on it somehow, I don't know if they couldn't really examine blood then, but you know what I mean. If they have just 2 sources of evidence, 2 witnesses, 2 or 3. A lot of times that would be eyewitness because they don't have the sort of ways of examining evidence we do, but there were other ways. What else? And the idea of that case law is just make sure you have enough evidence before you put people to death.
Right.
And before you convict them of these things.
These were basically just rules they should follow for like the legal system, right? Because every 7 years you're to forgive debt. So if anybody owes you a debt, by the 7th year, you're to forgive it.
Yes, ma'am. Anyone who is an Israelite had to forgive other Israelites their debts. Even a foreigner who purchases an Israelite as a slave, if they're living in the land of Israel, has to also free the Israelite. God makes sure to tell the foreigners who live there too to do that. It's really cool.
It does. It says, and the 7th year you're to forgive debt and set free slaves.
But if the person wants to be a slave for life, they have an option
to get that thing through their ear and be a slave for them for life.
Correct. And it gives you a different picture of slavery sometimes, because if God rules were followed, remember, a lot of this was debt slavery. You owed money and you couldn't pay it back, so you sold yourself to them to pay off your debt for a certain period of time. They were supposed to set them free at the 7th year and just clear any debt that was remaining immediately. And you were also supposed to calculate debt based off of when the Jubilee was about to happen. But the idea is to be fair, to be loving, to be just, even to those who owe you stuff and who are working for you. Like, you don't oppress the poor. You don't loan with interest for your people of Israel. You can loan with foreigners with interest, because the foreigners who do it, they do it as a business. Right. You're doing business deals with them. But for your people, you're not to oppress them with interest. You're not to oppress them with long periods of slavery. And so there's a bunch of stuff going on there.
Yeah, it says don't be tight-fisted or selfish or stingy. This Bible actually uses the word stingy, and I love that word. Don't be stingy. You will lend but not borrow. You will rule them; they will not rule you. There will never cease to. There will never be. There will. I made this note. There will never cease to be poor people. So you can't be stingy. You're never not going to be around people that could use your like. There's always going to be somebody poorer than you. There's always going to be somebody in need. So God, instructs us to not be stingy. You are stingy towards your poor brother and give him nothing. So,
yep. So the Lord also uses this. He says, there will never cease to be poor people, but you won't always have me, to make sure that they say, look, that woman's sacrifice for me that you say should have went to the poor instead, you can take care of the poor later. They won't go away. I'm about to die. So what she did for me is good. It's special. So he uses this passage to talk about how, look, you'll always have the poor with you, and you can take care of them afterwards, like I've commanded you, like my Father's commanded you. But you don't always have me. So the fact that you should be paying attention to me during this time doesn't mean you have to give everything to the poor that you would have given to me, So there's all that, and then we're at the end.
All right. So we are through with week 10. I think we are going to do week 11 and week 12 on Saturday of this coming week. We're exhausted. We've been doing this for 2 days, and I still have to do the drawing tonight if we get enough subscribers. So I'll have to do that before we leave to go back home. So just stay tuned for the contest. I would show you the items that's in the contest, but it's a Dunkin' Donuts $15 gift card, a Proverbs necklace that says she is clothed with strength and dignity, and a cross bracelet and cross earrings. And you can win that for free just by subscribing. So y'all go subscribe. If you've already subscribed, share this on your share one of our videos on your social media and invite people to subscribe to our channel. And I'll get you entered, and we'll go ahead and get that drawing done tonight. But thank you so much for joining us.
Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We love you. Have a great day.
Bye.